high-end stuff, but we had to translate it to a consumer's language. We had to translate it into probably not mainstream, but eatable for people who were at home sitting and watching extraordinary things, beautiful things, new directions, new ideas. So what we did was make another story out of something very new. And the moment you start retelling a story which has been told for the first time by someone who invented that, you get the ingredients, in fact, the well-known ingredients from the one who started with it, but you take new ingredients and make a new story out of it. And that's very interesting because if you were to add something to a story, you get a different story. In basic, it can be the same story, but while making television, you can add a number of layers to the story and make a different story, a more beautiful, or a story with different colors, or a story with some magic. Mm-hmm. That's all in the technique of television.
But is this is specific to making television, but is it also specific to making television about technical things?
Oh yes, yes. We always said it's probably not interesting when there's only one computer. If you cannot make a television, you cannot make television out of a computer because a computer is boring. So what you need is at least some vivid images to create a new story. The people who were making the film Nemo, they started with only one computer, and well, as long as they were talking about their way of using a well-known technique into something new for a movie, they weren't successful. But as soon as they had something, a talking potato, the industry said, wow, that's interesting. They're talking about a talking potato. How do you do that? There we came in and we got to know the people, and they said, well, it's quite easy. It's a well-known technique, but it's the first time that we show it on television. You put a helmet on your head, some sensors on your face, on important faces that make you well, a mouth movement that might seem a potato like a human face, but we use the human face as a model for the potato. So there they started putting a human factor behind the potato, and that was interesting. And there, after the potato, came, for instance, a car, or came a bicycle, or a fish, like in Nemo. And it's still the same technique. But as soon as the company started to create pictures, images, then it got very realistic, and people started to love Nemo, and they started to love the talking potato.
So you need a human aspect in that.
Always.
Is that something you agree with?
Yes, but I don't agree with the fact you always need a certain untruth. You're trying to make people believe that there's always a human factor, or there's something vivid, or something more than there is. And I think when you design a product or a movie or whatever, you should always tell the truth, because that way people learn more about your product and about your movie or whatever. And making a car laugh, I think it's not the way to get people to learn more about technology.
Do you think that's important?
I think it's important to connect people with technology, but they don't always have to understand it. That's true.
My personal opinion is that it's probably very interesting for engineers to get to know 100% of the elements of technique. But for instance, a reader or a television watcher or a radio listener is only interested in the highlights of technique. And it sounds very dumb or probably mainstream, but you can only make a story out of a new technique by only taking the highlights and not the in-between segments. That's interesting for the engineer and for students, but it's absolutely not interesting for the watchers, the listeners, or...
Is that true, or do you think you can make the whole of technique interesting to people?
It's going to take a long while, I think. I'm not sure. I think you always need some kind of interface with the technique or technology, and probably that's through making something vivid or human. I think that's one way to solve your problem.
But do you see it as one of your goals of being a technician, an engineer, to explain to people how beautiful engineering is? Or?
I don't think that's my task as an industrial design engineer. My task is to make a product that's useful or anyway reliable. Of course, you always have to think about how people work with products, but I don't think that's the main issue with designing products or any.
Because for you, what is the main issue about designing products?
I don't know. Not yet, I think. Maybe it's the usability or making a product possible. I think that's my main issue. If you need a solution for a problem, you need a way to solve your problem, and when you've solved it, you need to market it, and I think that's the first thing you have to do as an industrial design engineer.
Okay, but marketing is also part of it.
It's part of it, yes.
Yeah, so if I may react on what Hasso said earlier about he wants the truth to be out there about technology. I certainly don't agree with that, because like what Douwe Kroeske said, technology at itself isn't really that interesting. What's interesting about technology is what you can do with it. That's the way I see it. Technology in itself is worth nothing if you can't do anything with it. But I'm also convinced that any technology, if you're creative enough, can be used for something that makes sense. So about what you said, your question about what should an industrial designer really do, my answer would be make products that make sense. And whatever sense is, that's up to the end user. And apparently, as long as they want to pay money for it or want to use it, then I guess it makes sense. It can be really
frustrating. If you take it from, let's say, the people at the other end of the television, or people at the other end of the newspapers or radio or whatever, it's probably better for engineers to stay away from that part, because it can be very superficial. It can be not that interested as you as an engineer, as a student, wants to dive into the matter. It's probably far away from the thing that you actually want to reach in your personal study.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's really important for an engineer to be able to tell the story about his technology and not go into all those details, because otherwise it would be really boring. Yeah. But to, like you say, take out the highlights and try to tell your passion about the product. Especially as an industrial designer, you should be able to sell your product, because you can design a product that's according to you is the best product that was ever invented. But if you can't sell it, then it's still no use. If nobody wants to have it, then you made it for nothing.
Clive, I see that you don't completely agree.
Not completely, hardly at all.
Okay.
First of all, I think the notion of making a product simply for a client, it may be important, but it's too utilitarian. What interests me about design is how people think about things and why they come up with designs. And I find it interesting when I listen to Yandel, JD, before we sat down here earlier today, you said engineers can't make real for other people the creativity and the excitement. And then here you sit at the table and say, people aren't interested in what the details are. And that's in part because we haven't made the excitement important. Why is a bridge beautiful? Why is a structure built beautiful? Why is some tea kettles beautiful and other tea kettles are ugly beyond belief? There's a connection.
Oh, yeah.
And there's something about engineering that I think you can explain to people. It's hard, and engineers are not known for doing it very well. But if you want to say at the same time people are not interested and that they can't understand it, I don't buy that.
Well, it's probably what I actually mean is while creating something on television, the maker's standard is don't try to be complete, because while trying to be complete you forget about the story, because the watcher, the listener, is not interested in completion to 100%. They're only interested in the highlights, and as soon as you go from highlight A to B to C to D, etc., etc., you can still walk along the storyline. And there you make a complete story, but not the complete story of the technique.
Okay.
And that is what I meant. But on the other hand, it's always very, very energetic to watch someone talk as a very passionate engineer about his thing, his invention, his tool. I just told you that I used to be a teacher of sports. It's hard to explain a child how to catch a ball, because that is something natural. Children are always afraid of catching a ball because it comes from that direction, and you have to catch it. You don't want to catch it, you have to catch it, because otherwise it'll bump against your head. So you have to catch a ball. If you try to, while explaining a child, a ball comes from that direction to your direction. You want to catch the ball. How do you catch a ball? If you succeed in explaining how to catch a ball, children start laughing because they enjoy catching a ball. And as soon as children enjoy catching a ball, they enjoy the game.
So,
and that's about, well, engineering. That's about people who collect, well, anything. That's about life. If you enjoy it, it's easier to explain. If you enjoy things, if you enjoy technique, it's easier to fulfill your task in explaining 100% of the technique.
okay, yeah.
If you want to explain 100% of the technique.
I would like to go to the audience for a little bit, and we've also been talking about whether it is the role of you students, of you engineers, to explain, to tell other people about engineering, about technique. What do you think about that? Is there someone who has to say something about it? Is it your role? Do you do it well? Don't you do it well enough? Should other people do it for you? Will you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
My name is Saskia. I was last time on the Engineering is Magic symposium. I'm now a PhD student, and in our work we have to sell our work to industrial partners, and every 3 months we have a quarterly meeting, and we have to present our work and our progression to the industrial partners. And I feel that it's always very difficult to explain to managers mostly about what is so important about what I'm doing. And actually it's the same, selling your work